All right, so from the beginning, I'm just going to do a quick recap. I'm going to go ahead and actually reopen the Unreal Launcher. So if you're starting from the screen, you just want to open up the Unreal Launcher. And from there, you just want to click on your version of Unity that you have. Hopefully, it's close to 420.3. And you just click the Launch button and let the launcher kind of come up. And then you will get this opening up the engine. It's just loading it right there. Once that comes up, you will be presented with two big tabs, one of them being a Projects tab and a New Projects tab. What you want to have selected is, because we are starting from scratch, is the New Projects tab selected. And you want to have the blueprint selected because that's what we are using today. And you want to have the third-person template, which we are using that Unreal provides as a starter project, essentially. And so what you want to do is just go have that third-person project selected. Make sure it's in blueprints, not C# or C++. Apologies. And so you want to have third person. And then down at the bottom, you'll see your folder and name. You can save it to wherever you want, and you can name the project whatever you want. I named the current one that you saw previously Keylock. That's just for a little abbreviation so I can identify what project that I am currently working on. And when you're done with that, go ahead and just click the Create Project, and you will end up loading into this scene with all of the objects that were previously there. And I think that should catch up for the very first part, if I can get a confirmation from Andrew. All right, cool. So right where we left off, the third-person text that you saw on the screen, I want to rename it to make this project feel a little bit more unique, so we kind of know what mechanic we're working on. It just kind of makes it a little bit looks a little bit nicer. So as I was saying before, you just left-click on that object and select it. You will then be able to see all the information that can be changed in the Details panel on the right. That defaults to the lower half of the right side, which you can just see right here. I'm going to point my mouse to it for those watching. Just right down here, you can see. And if you start from the top, it should be the third component down at the top there. You will see something called text. That is pretty much the text input that will be displayed to the screen. I'm just going to name mine Key and Lock so I can remember what I'm doing. It just kind of helps because just see later, Key, press enter, and you will see that it updates there on the screen. And so now it's just kind of a nice little touch there for our scene before we get started. And after that, we are actually ready to go ahead and start making our door component. Do we have any questions inside of the room? Oh. All right. So now we are ready to create our door. The door is going to be like kind of the main component of for today, because we have our two blueprints. We're going to create the door and we're going to create the key itself, and those two components will interact with each other in order to pretty much function. So I'm actually going to start by creating a blueprint. In order to create a blueprint, you want to navigate to your content browser, which is the bottom part of your screen, which is where you see all your folders there. You just want to click on the content button right here to make it to the root folder, because I think it defaults you to the third-person blueprint folder. So I'm just going to left-click on the content folder, and that will bring me up to the root. And then within this little window here, I'm actually just drag this up real quick. All these windows are modular, so if you want to make one bigger or smaller, if you put your mouse up onto the edge, you should get a little arrows pointing both ways, and you can click and drag the windows to size them as you please. So I'm going to go ahead and create a blueprint folder. I use those to organize all my objects or any blueprints that I create. It's a good way to have it, just kind of keep in folders different objects of different types. So I'm just going to right-click, and you will be presented with this array of options. And at the very top, there will be a new folder button, and I'm just going to name this Blueprints. And just click Enter, and you will have your new folder created. After you have, and for those see it, you right-click in the content, click New Folder, and then just rename it to whatever you want. I renamed mine Blueprints, so I will know what I contain in that folder. All right, so after that, you can go ahead and double-click into your Blueprints folder, and that will put you instead right into your Blueprints folder, so we can create any blueprints or objects we want, and they'll be stored there for us to navigate to later. So now we're going to create our door blueprint. In order to do that, we are going to right-click in the content browser, just like we did to create the folder, except for this time we're going to go to Create Basic Assets. It's a little halfway down from the top, and under there we're going to click Blueprint Class, and that is going to be the object we are creating. You can just left-click it, and you will be presented with this window here where it asks you to pick the parent class. We're not going to go into too much detail for that today. We are just going to click the actor at the very top, And so essentially we are creating a blueprint class of type actor. And we're going to name that a door because this is going to be our door component. And again, to create that blueprint, you just right click in the component browser, navigate to blueprint class, and then just click actor for under pick parent class window, and you will be given this. I'll do this, and you can name it to whatever you want. I'm just going to delete it because I just created it. Yes, Sean. The starting from where? Making the blueprint. All right. So what you're going to do is in the content browser, you want to have your mouse within the content browser window in this little area right here. You're just going to click the right click on the mouse button, and you'll be presented with these options just like we were when we created the folder. And then you want to navigate to blueprint class. It's under the create basic assets section, and you just want to left click on it. I just missed left click. And then you will be presented with the window pick parent class, and we are just going to click actor, the top button that's available to you. And then after that, when you left click on it, you can rename it there and then click enter when you are done renaming it. So if I name this just BP1, enter, we now have a blueprint called BP1. For any reason, if you want to delete an object, you can left click it and then just click the delete button and then click delete, and that will just get rid of the object. Do we have any questions on chat? Nope. All right. All right, cool. So now we are ready to create our door assets, or blueprint, as I should call it correctly. So to open the blueprint, we need to go into the blueprint editor. And to navigate there, you essentially want to just double click your blueprint that you created a few moments ago. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click on it. You'll see it will say loading and the name you gave it, which ours was door, and you'll be presented with a new window that is the blueprint editor. From there, I'm just going to, you can either maximize it to make it full screen, or as I said before, the windows are very modular. So you can actually drag this tab and drag it up next to the third person example map. And that way you can use two tabs and just switch back and forth easier. And again, to do that, this is the window you got when you double click the blueprint, and you can just drag this tab and put it right next to it. And then you can now easily switch between the editor and the blueprint for the door. All right, so the first things we need to do to create the door is we need to create its physical presence and the trigger that pretty much detects when the player is near it. Thankfully for us, those are just two components that we can just click by adding and typing them in because they already exist within the editor for us. So the first step to add those is you want to look and navigate to the top left on the components window and click the big green button that says add component. Just click that there, and two things we need is a cube. So you can just type in cube and press enter, and you are presented with the giant white cube. And again, to navigate and move around in the viewport of this blueprint is the same as you did in the editor. Right click to pan your camera and WSAD to move left, right, forward, and backwards. And if you want, using Q and E to go up and down. So now that we have our cube here, we're going to add one more. Actually, we want to make it look like a door frame, or not a door frame, but a door itself, because I feel like if a cube just swung around, it would be kind of boring because it doesn't actually look like a door. So to do that, we actually want to scale our properties for the door. I'm just going to pull up the values on my other window real quick. All right, so if you navigate with the cube selected from the components window, you want to have, yeah, as I said, have the cube selected. Make sure you can actually see the orange outline around the cube. And you want to navigate to the details panel on the right side. You will see one module down there is a component called transform. That is where we can change the location, rotation, and scale. In this case, we are changing the scale to make the cube look like a door. And I have those values right here I can give you. We are going to change so the red is the X, Y is the green, and blue is Z, the Z axis. It takes a little bit to remember, but you can also just hover your mouse over it, and it will tell you what value you are changing. You have a question? Yes, sir.
I do not have the detail panel on the right side. Where would I go to find the detail panel to put it onto the current tab?
Let's see. That is very, very interesting. Go. Hold on. Hey, Keon. Question. Okay, so the question was his viewport. Let's see, I'll demonstrate it here really quick. So John's question was essentially that this details panel is missing, like this. And there should be, I don't have a memory off. Keon, did we get it? Did we get? All right, how did you solve that?
Go to the window up top.
Window?
Yeah, and then you can add or remove any.
Okay, so that's where you added. Okay, so you did just go to window, and then it was the details panel that I'm not seeing. Second one, okay, right here, and you have it checked. Okay, so if anyone is having that problem at home, thank you, Keon. If the details panel is missing, you can go to the Windows tab at the top and click Details, and whatever windows are checked, they will be enabled. All right, so back to the scales. We just had a quick question right there. We're going to change the x-axis. I'm going to go ahead and give you the values. The x-axis is going to be 0.25, and then you'll see the cube will scale accordingly. And we're going to change the y-axis scale value, which is the middle green one, to 1.25. And you'll notice the value doesn't change until you click enter. And that's when it actually updates the value to the cube. And then for our z, we are going to update the value from 1 to 2. Click enter. Now we have a thing that kind of resembles a door. I said that because when I was creating this, having a cube rotate around kind of looked funny. So I had to figure out, or not figure out, but I had to make it look like a door so it doesn't look as bad. All right, again, those values are from the x are 0.25, and then the y is 1.25, and the z is 2. Yes, Sean? Yes, I can. Actually, no, Sean can write that on. No, Sean, Keon can write. I'm getting names mixed up. Appreciate it, Keon. He's just writing the values of the scale for the door on the whiteboard, which is x 0.25, y 1.25, and on the z 2. Thank you, Keon. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add our collider component, which essentially is the box that detects decide what volume where to detect the player when it approaches the door. So we go and navigate. Oh, we love auto saving. By the way, that's one of my favorite features of Unreal, that it auto saves projects for me. So when my computer crashes to my own fault, it is not fully, or it is fully recoverable. So we want to navigate back to the top left where we added the cube, and we want to click the big green button on add to add a component again, and we want to type in collider or just COL, and you can get those 3 options right there. We're just going to use a box collider, so I'm just going to go ahead and just press enter, and it will add that component to our blueprint. So I'm just going to name that COL. That's what I normally just kind of rename them for now. So now we have a collider and a physical cube. However, we cannot see the collider currently. So we want to pretty much scale it up, and we're going to give that, and I can get those values for you in just 1 second. All right, so with your collider selected, or before we move on, do we have any questions or anything? Us? All right, perfect. So with your collider selected, we're just going to drag it forward, and we're going to scale it to kind of take a little bit more space in the world so the player doesn't have to be as precise when approaching the door. And so I'm just going to kind of make it a big box. I'm just going to kind of scale this up. Let's see, make this. So to scale properties, you can either do it in the transform or within the transform component. I just lost my mouse. Here it is. Transform, and you can move these and just kind of scale. Oh, that's not wrong. You can scale the values here. Or if you, with your object selected, if you click the this button right here, which I'll go over really quick. There's 3 modes of just kind of movement and ways you can affect objects in the scene. You have your transforming, your rotating, and your scaling, which are, you can see in the transform, location, rotation, and scale here. And you can also change right here with these 3 buttons to move in between the 3 modes. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the scale button here, and you can just drag across these axes and make the box just kind of bigger than the door, and we're going to make it in front of the door. I'm going to make sure notification wasn't necessary. All right, cool. So you can just kind of scale it. You can take my values precisely if you want. I also brought the box up on the x-axis on the location to 160. I'll move my mouse to it so you can see right there. Right here, that is the only part where we changed it for now. But something I will show and address in just one moment is we're actually going to come back and change a few of these values, but I want to show you why we need to change some of these values in a moment, and it'll just kind of all make sense in just one thing. Do we have any questions about the collider or adding the collider or scaling the box? All right. So you see, if you look at the kind of midway on the left side, or offset from the left side, you'll see this question mark with gears. That is the compile button. You want to click that button whenever you're at a pause or a moment to with your blueprint. Essentially, it's going to give you any errors that you may have between your logic. But because we haven't written any logic yet, we should not have a problem. You can just left-click that button, and if you get the big green check mark, you are all good to go, which means there is no compiling errors. So after that, we actually want to navigate back to our editor. And for me, I'm just going to click on this tab over here. For you, if yours is full screen, wow, that's fancy. Oh, I'm using 2 monitors and it just hid away in my tab. There we go. You can just click the minimize button and you will be presented with the editor. So in the room, we can now drag out our door that you can now see has updated in our component, or I'm sorry, our content browser. And the way to get it into the scene is you can actually just left click, hold left click, and drag it into the editor. And you will see that it will just go halfway through the floor, which we will fix in just 1 second. So to fix that, we just on the y-axis, you can just drag up, and you can again fly using the WSID and right click, and just kind of make it sit right on the floor. I'm actually gonna put mine right in front of the key and lock sign, so I'm going to rotate it by pressing the E button with it selected to bring up the rotate tool. Rotate it 180 degrees, and then I'm going to press W or click on the translate tool right here and just drag it right here. I'm just gonna again make sure it is on the ground properly. Yes, sir.
Last week, we mentioned that there was a snap to.
Yes, it is the end key. But because we don't have any physical colliders right now, it should still snap halfway through, I believe. I can test that real quick. His question was, last week we talked about there's a hotkey that moves objects floating in the air to snap to the collider under them, and that is the end key. I don't think it works on this door right now, but I will try it real quick. It is FN. Yeah, FN. For me, it's FN end. It may just be end for you, but for me, it puts it back to the origin location. There is a way to fix that, and those are the values we can change later in the blueprint itself. Escape works as well for some people. Yes, sir. You can use that as well. It's really more of personal preference. Everyone kind of figures there's in Unreal, it's very modular around how like it takes inputs to navigate through the editor. For those questions was if you could press spacebar to switch through the to switch between the modes, and you can, again, it's all personal preference. I come from Unity, so I've been using W, E, and R for like 6 years, so I just kind of navigate based on that, but it's all personal preference. So now that we have our door, if you notice, if we rotate our door, our door will say, I'll just go ahead and do it. Our door's axis right now is in the center of the door, which doesn't really make any sense because doors do not swing or pivot from the center. So essentially we need to offset the door from the origin of the blueprint, which essentially means we're going to go to the blueprint, and I'll actually just go ahead and show it. So we're going to go back to our blueprint. I'm sorry. So if you go back to your blueprint, you'll see, and you fly up to it. I'm just going to quickly drag this door out of the way. This little circle right here, yes, sir? All right, so to get back to the blueprint, for me, I have my 2 tabs at the top. If you have your 2 panels, you can click on the Unreal, and all of your panels should show up. Or if you can't find it and you just want to bring it back up in your content browser, go to our blueprints folder, which is just like this in your content, blueprints, and then you can double click on your door again and it will bring it up. Size of the program, I imagine you're referring to the actual size of like the engine installed on the computer. We'll get some clarification. We'll get back to that. Is it already installed on the device? I know it says it when you install, but you can. Is it to the project or the actual engine itself? What you should be able to do is if you can navigate to your folder on your computer where the actual engine is stored, you can right click and click properties, and it will give you the size of that folder. All right. The actual engine. Yes, I know. I believe it's around maybe at least 10 gigs. Yeah, I would say I'll have that answer for you just 1 second. All right, so back to our blueprint doors. We want to navigate to the door, and to get there, as we said right before, you can double click it, bring it back up. We need to offset the door's origin, so it rotates on one of the sides of the door. I'm going to put mine on the left side. Let me get my values real quick. So to do so, I'm going to come to my door, And I'm just going to offset the Y value to -61. And you'll see that will shift it over to where that white little sphere is right on the corner. And then I'm going to click the compile. And so what I just did is I just offset the door so it will pivot and actually look like a door. Anyway, so if I go compile on the top left, make sure we get our green check mark. Again, I'm going to write that value on the board. We're going to click on the cube and go to the location in the green, which is the Y value, and change it to -61. Right, so these are the is this the location of the box glider? Scale. So all right, door. The only value location we're changing is the Y equals 61. Let's do that. Sorry. All right, so now we can navigate back to our third person example map, which is our editor. But before we do go forward, do we have any questions at all? All right, cool. So now if you notice in the editor with our door selected, you can select it in the world outliner, or you can just left click it. When it is hovered or all covered in orange, you know it's selected. If I rotate it, you will now see that it rotates on an actual door hinge kind of style. It looks like a door and it functions like a door, which is really good. So now we actually can get into the logic of the door itself, telling it when to open, detecting the player, seeing if the player has the key, and kind of all the fun stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. All right, so now we are going to go back into our door, our blueprint, and there's several ways to go back. You can click on the tab, you can double click on it and bring it up, but we're just going to go ahead and navigate there. And you will see in the midway, we have our viewport window in the middle of the screen. You see two more windows, a construction script and the event graph. What we're going to be using today for the visual scripting for the blueprint code is the event graph. So what you can do is just left click on it and you will be taken into the event graph editor. Into that, you want to go into your blueprint for your door, go from the viewport, and then you just click on the event graphs. We're not going to be using the event actor begin overlap, or this event actor overlap, so I'm just going to left click it and click the delete key. And we are also not using the event tick, so as well, I'm going to left click on it and click the delete key as well. So a couple of things we want to create before we get into the code. There is two variables we want. Those variables are, or I'll just go ahead and name them. One is a Boolean, which is a true or false. It's either set to true or set to false. And we're going to name it HasOpen. I'll get to that and we'll create it in a second. We're also going to create a rotator to store the default rotation value that our door starts at. And that will be used later for an offset, so the door actually rotates no matter what direction it starts at. That will be cleared up a little bit later. So to create our variables, you want to go down to on the left side of the screen and find where it says variables right here. And we want to left click on the plus variable button, or you can just left click on it. The plus will turn into a variable. And you will see a new name right here where we can name it, or name our variable. First one we're going to create is HasOpens. So I'm just going to put has_opens and then click enter. And then one last thing I'm going to do for that variable is if you go to select that variable and you go to the far right, you will see this little empty circle. You want to left click on that and essentially what that does is makes that variable public to be accessed from other classes. And to create that variable, we went from our viewport, we navigated to our event graph, went down to our variables on the left side under the components window, clicked our plus variables, and each color has a representation of what type of variable it is. In this case, red is a Boolean, and every variable you create defaults to Boolean, so we can just leave it how it is right now. So now that we have our HasOpens variable and we set it to public by clicking the I on the right side, we can compile. We want to compile our blueprint. And that is so we can make sure our default value in the details panel on the far right, if you see right here, go all the way down to the bottom, our default value is set to not checked, and you can check it. That means it starts true. That means the value starts false. And we want to start false. The door has not opened by default. And this Boolean is for later. So when the player does walk up to the door opens the first time. Then we set HasOpen to true. And if you don't have that variable, essentially the player could walk up to the door and make the door just spawn back and open over and over again. And it starts to look hectic. So this is just we have done what we need to, we are done. That's what that variable is for. And then the last variable we're going to create is we want to create a variable that stores the rotator. So again, we're going to follow these same instructions from left clicking on a plus variable. And I'm just going to name this one ROT. Did I do that right? Yeah, ROT, standing for the rotator. And we want to change the variable type to rotator. So we can do that in a couple of ways. You can left click on the red icon there and you will get a menu which gives you all different types of variables. Again, there you can just left click on the rotator or the color, and we want to locate rotator and just left click on that. And you will see the color has changed, representing that the new value or the variable has a new type. Do we have any questions on there, how to navigate or how to create those two variables? No? Anything from chat? All right. Let's see 1 second, make sure you have those. And I'm going to pull up the next thing we need to do. All right, so something we need to do first is we want to set our rotator value. So essentially, the rotating value, or the values we're going to be getting, you guys don't have to follow me, but the values we're going to be getting is this rotation value right here at the start. And the reason is, if the door started here, and later when we rotate our door, we're going to be telling it to rotate from 0 to 90 degrees. And if we do that, it would snap back to 90 and then go, or snap back to 0 and then rotate to 90. And so if I find it here, so even if our door sits here, it would snap here and then open that way. And that means no matter what angle the door starts at, it will always snap back to there. So we need the offset to pretty much come here for that. And so those are the values we're getting right here. We're just grabbing these values. So what you want to do is in your event graph, you want to find the event begin play node. It should be one of the default nodes. It's the one node that we did not delete. And we want to actually, let's see, there's 2 different ways we can do this. So there's 2 different ways. We want to set our rotator value, as I said, and grab our rotated values. We can left click this wire right here with this little arrow and drag out and let go, and you will be presented with the executable actions tab. Under this tab is where you can get access to any node that you can use within the editor. And essentially right from there, we are going to type in ROT, and you will find under variables, it will take you to variables, and by default right here, you'll find set rotator, and we can just left click. Do we have any questions so far? All right. Yes, sir. I'm sorry? Yes. All right. So the question was, so what you're putting in the node graph is your, so pretty much his question was for those watching is how to get the rotate or your variable into the event graph. So what we have is you named yours rotate. So if you just type in rotate, or if you drag left click and drag off of this arrow right here, you see the arrow on the bottom right? Yes, so you get the wireframe. Let go and type in rotate. Right there, you see set rotate, and you can just click right there, and now you have what is on the screen. I'll redo it 1 second on the screen. Another method, if you don't feel like memorizing your names or typing them out, is the faster way, which I do prefer, but it's always better to appreciate those ways before getting them. So another way you can get that is you can actually just left click your rotate or your variable you created and just drag it into the editor, and you can click set and you get the exact same thing, and then you would just connect the wire. It's really, again, up to user preference. There's 5 ways to do everything in this editor from what I have found. So that, again, if you didn't see it, you can just left click, drag out, and click set. Now I have way too many of these. I'm going to delete them. So now we set our variable, but right now it just sets to 0, 0, 0 and doesn't actually get our door's rotation. So a node we want to drag is we want to pretty much get the actor rotation. And it is literally as simple as left click and dragging off this purple pen to the left and let go. And you can type in get actor rotation right here. And under transformation, you'll see it come up. Just click enter. And now we are getting the rotation and storing it to our ROT value or whatever you named it back at home. Again, to do that is just a left click, drag out, and then just type in get actor, if you can spell, which I can't. And then you will see get actor rotation, and you can click it and you will have it there. Delete that. And again, if you ever need to delete a node, whatever's highlighted, just click the delete key and it will come out. So next thing we need to do is we're going to actually start the event to where the door starts to rotate. But there's actually two conditions we want to check first. We want to check, is this the player that has approached the door? If it is the player, does it have the key? And if it has the key, have we already opened? No, do the opening. So that's essentially the quick sentence view of what we're about to write. And we can break that up into the 3 sections. So first what we want to do is, if you notice, the red nodes that are on the screen are your events, the actual triggers that trigger the code that you put. So essentially what we want to do is trigger the door when a player walks up to it. In order to do that, we created that collider earlier. If you see it in the viewport here. You don't actually have to go back to the viewport to see it, but if you want to go back to your components and highlight the collider tab or the collider object, and then in your details, scroll all the way down where you see a bunch of green buttons. I always like that they put that because it's always hard to miss when I see those. You can just drag this window out if you can't read what they say, but what we are going to be using is the on component begin overlap. And that is essentially runs the first time the player or something enters that collider. So you can just click the big green plus button on it, and if you were in the event graph, it will take you to that trigger. Again, to do that, you want the collider selected, scroll all the way down in the details panel, and click the big plus button on component begin overlap. Do we have any questions so far in navigating to that event? All right, so now we are ready to check if it is the player, which we can be done in about 4 nodes. It's nothing too crazy. We're just essentially going to compare 2 strings. So what you can do is you can drag out from the wire right there, and that is your kind of like your order of not order of operations, pretty much the order of sequence. That's the white wire is showing you from this node I go to this node, from this node I go to this node, et cetera, for your entire program. So essentially from there, we can drag out, you'll get your executable actions, and I'm just going to type in print text or print text and click enter. This is a debug autosave. This is a debug node that actually does not compile when your game is built, so you can use them however you want within the editor, and when you actually go to build your final game, all of those are just not even considered or just left out when it compiles. So we don't want it to just drag and say hello. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, for the development only node, when you have the wires connect, does everything that follows the development only node get nullified as well, essentially? Do they get deleted from the compiler? The answer is no. It actually just skips from, for example, if I quickly add any other node directly after this one, let's say I'll just drag this out. Let's say I set my rotator again. The compiler, when it compiles, it will essentially just see that. And that's how that works. Yes, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that. So now that we have our print block, by default in text, you can see that it just says hello, and it will trigger when anything really enters the door. I'm just going to show you real quick. You don't have to follow me, just to show you so you can see what it looks like. If I click play and I run up to it, you can see it says hello in the top left, and it'll say that every single time I enter the doors pretty much collider that we created. So now what we want to do is we want to display the name of the character or object that approached the door so we can test our code to see if it's who we want, or like the player we're looking for. We're essentially checking to see if it's the player. And to do that, we actually want to get reference to the actor that came out of the collider, or that entered the collider. And to do that, you actually want to just drag out of the pin that says other actor. And this is essentially giving you a reference to the object that came in collision with that collider. So if you drag out from other actor and left click, and just let go, you can type in get display name. That's going to get you the name of the object as it is in the editor that you would see in the world outline. And to do that again, you drag out from the other actor and just type in get display name, and then just click enter, and it will come connected from here. Drag it out here from here. So what we want to do now is we essentially want to compare. So the name of by default, the name of our third-person character, which is the character that's moving around, is labeled as third-person character. So essentially we want to check, is the name that comes out from get display name equal to third person character? If so, this is our character. We can continue down our flow. So to follow up from here, we just want to drag out from this pink pen, this that returns a string, and we want to type in string space equals equals. So if you again you just drag out from the get display name and type in string equals equals and then click enter, you'll see equal string. And this is pretty much just comparing two strings. And remember I was talking about the kind of every type of variable has a color code to it. You can see that there is a red pen after our equals equals, which is representing a Boolean. And if you don't know which colors, you can actually put your mouse over it, highlight it, and it will say returns a Boolean value, and then it gives you a little definition. So it's going to compare the two strings, tell us if they are equal to each other, and if so, output will be true or false as so. Do we have any questions so far? All right. So from there, we actually can paste directly in this little text value. I just had to copy and paste it because I don't feel like typing it out. But what you want to type in is third person character. And that is essentially just going to check, as I just said before, the display name and compare it and say, is our display name third person character? And then it will give us our output as true or false. So after you have that, we are going to drag out from the right wire of our print text, and I'm going to type in a branch. For those with any minimal coding experience, a branch is essentially an if statement. It's your other form of just if statement comparing with Booleans. It's either true and it goes one way, or it's false and it goes the other way. So naturally what we want to do is we just want to drag from our strings equals equals right into the branch. So whatever the answer is for our third person, our comparative of strings, if it's true or false, we'll go into the branch, and then the branch will decide which way the path goes. All right. I like to do this normally. I just always like, after creating a small little branch of code, just click the little compile button, make sure it's green. It's good to check because that way, if you do a couple lines of code, or in this case, a couple nodes, and you get an error, you can kind of generalize it. All right, I just did these since my last compile, so you just kind of narrow down when where your error might be. So what we're going to do now, really quick, is from the true. I'm actually just going to do this here. Drag out from the true node, and I'm just going to type in print text again, and I'm just going to type in the text value here. This is where you can change it. I'm just going to type, this is the player. And it gets a little covered, but this is the player. And I'm going to click this drop down on the print text and change the color. You can click that by clicking on the color square right here. And I'm just going to drag it to a green or whatever color you'd like, and then click OK. And then I'm going to recollapse it by clicking the up arrow right here. And that just kind of collapses it, keeps things neat. And then I'm going to drag out from the false and type in the very same thing, print text. And I'm just going to quickly change this to, this is not the player. Drop down again, and I'm going to change this to a red to just kind of make it easier to see. And for those that just recap, drag out from here, type in print text, and set our text value to what we want. So now if you compile this and go into your editor, which is our tabs, going back and forth, click play. If you walk up to it, you notice this is the player and it says hello. Hello is the tab. We actually forgot something really quick. In the door blueprint, we have our print text that we first created. We never told it to say anything but hello by default. I want it to say the name of the object that entered. So what you can do is that's for the elevator, threw me off. You can just actually drag from the return value right into the print text, and it will convert the string to a text with this other fancy little node here, which is just casting essentially. But you can just kind of do that and just kind of leave it right there. It looks right like that. So again, what we just added is we just added the get display name, and we drew it to the print text as well. I'm going to click my compile, and I'm going to go back to the editor. And now when I click play, when I walk up to it, it will say third person character, and this is the player. So that's just a check saying this is the player. We are now ready to continue. So our next step is before we go back to our door, we actually need to edit the third person character itself. It's very quick. Well, all we need to do is really add one Boolean, and it's really the key. Does the player have the key? And that's either true or it's false. And by default, of course, it would be false. And then when it walks into the key, it becomes true. So to get to your player in your scene, you can just left click on the player, and you can either double click it, or in the world outliner, if you can find third person character, you can just click under type, edit this third person character, and it will edit the blueprint of this character. And again, to get there, and you can also add the tab back at the top. It should default there after you've moved it. And to get there again, you can either double click. Actually, no, I hate double clicking. That's why I always go to the edit type. You can just go the outliner, click edit third person, and it'll bring it up. We are ignoring all of this. This is just the default input setting from Unreal. We are just going to add one variable under the variables tab right here, under components, under my blueprint. Click the plus on the variable. It's going to stay as a Boolean, and we're just going to type in has_key. And get there, it's just adding like the variables that we did last time under component, blueprint, variables, plus variable, and then name it has_key. I thought someone's computer just exploded. And so it can, and we want to let this be public. So you want to left click on it and make sure the eye is shown there. And then you can compile your code, or your blueprints that we've been doing, and you will now see has_key is right here. So that's all we need to do for the player total. That's it. So now we actually are done with the editor, or we're done with the third person blueprint. All right. So now we can go back to our door, and we can continue our code on the true branch right here, because now essentially if this is not the player, that's where the code ends for that point, and it will recheck next time it comes in. So now we can drag out from our print text, that is, this is the player, off of our true branch, and we want to type in cast to third person character. That's essentially casting to that blueprint object of type third person character. I'm just going to click enter. It's a node that looks like this. And again, you just drag off and click in cast to third person character, and you can just kind of bring it right down there and click enter. Do you have any questions so far? Can you get to that node properly? And in chat as well if you have anything. All right. Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. So the question was: is the variable that we added to the third-person character, or is the variable we added to the third-person character a Boolean? The answer is yes. That is because essentially the has_key variable in our blueprint is only checking it as false when we don't have the key, and it is true when we do have the key. And essentially, when we walk up to the door, it's going to cast what we're about to get into, cast the third-person character, and it's going to say, "What is this Boolean? Is this Boolean true? Okay, cool. They have the key. They can continue. Oh, it's false. Okay, it's the player, but they don't have the key," and then the code ends. So that's essentially yes, it is a Boolean right there. So in our door, I'm going to go back to our door, and we love autosaves because autosaves are amazing and the best thing in the world. So we go from our print text, cast the third person. So something we need to do is we need to make a reference to the actual which third person character we're talking about, because this is in a world where there could be several third person characters in the scene. We want to talk about the third person character that actually entered that area. So what we can do is you want to drag, if you want to go back to your on component begin overlap, and from other actor, you want to click and drag, and you want to keep going, and the window should move automatically like this. And we want to attach that to our third person character on the object. That's essentially getting reference to the which third person object we're talking about. And to do that again, you can go left click on the actor and drag the actor all the way out, and then just select it, add it there. I don't know about y'all, but that blue wire kind of messes with me. Just going through all the nodes. Yes, I see some head nodding in the seats there. So I want to make it go up and over the nodes so I can kind of tell where it's going. And there is a way to do that. And when I found out, it was the most beautiful thing I think I ever discovered while I was learning Unreal. So at any point in time on a wire, if you double click on it, you add a little point. And with that point, you can highlight and drag it around. And if you can double click again on another position, and you can essentially organize your wires to make them look less wild. Yes, they crisscross. I'm not concerned. So yeah. So now that we have our cast to our third person character and we have a reference to our object. Do we any questions at all? Yes, sir. We're good? All right, perfect. Never mind, there was no question. All right, so now as the third person character, we can drag out as the third person character, which is the bottom right node, and we can literally just type in has_key. I lied. There we go, has. And you just type in has the first part of your word, and I'm just going to type in get has key, and that will give me the value of the key. Sorry, chat, I just realized I was muted for a moment. It was only like 5 seconds. So what we want to do is now we want to drag and get a branch, and you can either do it from here and just type in branch, or you can drag out from our wire pin, type in branch. You can do it multiples of ways. You can also just click space. I lied. You can click right click and then branch. There's ways to get branches and everything everywhere. But essentially with our branch, we want to drag the output of has key and put it in here. And that essentially, this is the point of doesn't have key, has the key. All right. So I'm just going to pick up just a little bit here to get us going. We only have the last part and then the last part of the door and then the key. Cool. All right, cool. So now considering we have the key, I'm actually going to put out reference here real quick. We want the door to open. So from our true statement from our branch, we actually want to set has opened, and you can type that in by just typing in set space has opened or whatever you named your variable. And I'm just going to set that to true by clicking on the box right there, and that will set has opened to true. And then that way we can now continue our code. This next part is a node that I wanted to introduce last week, but I decided to save it for this one. It's the timeline node. It's essentially a way of animating values without using animations. I like it. It makes things like cleaner, takes a lot less time. It's one of my favorite nodes to use. That's why. That's essentially it. So we can drag out from our set has opened from true, and we can just type in timeline, and you'll see add timeline on that node. You just click enter, and you'll get this big fun box with a bunch of inputs and like 4 outputs. And I'm just going to leave it at timeline 0 right there. You can name it if you want, but you just want it right this. Quickly, do we have any questions inside? All right, cool. So essentially what we want to do is we're going to edit the rotation value of the door to make it actually rotate itself on the axis that we have. So I'm just going to double click on the timeline node, and you'll see that it opens up a new window. From there, we can click on Add Float Track, which is on the left side, and if you hover over it, it's the F with the plus, and which essentially will give you this new little track here. And I'm just going to name mine. I'm just going to name it Rod as well, because why not? So again, to get there, double click on your timeline, and it will bring up this window, and you click Add Float Track, and you get here. We call it Rod. We are essentially just going to change a value over. I'm going to name it. If you see this little length tab, this length tab represents the how long that animation is total. And I'm just going to make mine take 2 seconds. So you just press 2 and click enter, and then we are ready to essentially values. So if you hold down shift, left shift, and double click on the white wire, you add a point to your timeline. And with that selected, you will see new values up here for the time and value. That's where you set the for the two axes, period over time, and then the value that point has. Do we have any questions? All right. So from there, I'm just going to set our point in time to 0, so we make sure we start at the beginning of our track. And I'm actually going to leave the value at 0 as well. And that is just kind of our nice, clean start point. And then we really only need one more point, and I'm going to hold down shift and double click again. And I'm going to set this time to the end of length, and I'm going to set the value to 90. So essentially, and then, so we're going to 90. And if you look to the left of time, the time input field, you will see these 2 arrows. These are essentially condensing the track so it fits in one screen. And I just do that. You can click both of them real quick to just kind of fit your values, so you can just kind of see representation of the value over time. And that's precisely what we need, is just at 0, be at 0, and over a period of 2 seconds, make your way to 90. I'm actually not going to, I'll do it. So quickly, if you hold down left click and highlight both points, you can right click. Is it? No, did I do it wrong? Actually, I'm going to ignore that at all. That function was being a little bit weird earlier today. Let me see if that's right. Float, yeah, we're just going to ignore that for today. So yeah, so now that we've created our timeline and we have our points from 0 to 90, and now what we can do is pretty much use that timeline and make the door actually rotate. As far as the timeline goes, do we have any problems at all? All right. All right. So now we're going to go back to our event graph, and we're going to drag out from update, and we're just going to click set. We're going to type in set actor. We're going to put relative location or rotation. My bad. So I'm going to find it down here. Set actor relative rotation. Just click enter here, and I think I did that wrong. No, that's right. All right, cool. So again, it was just drag out of the update and type in set actor relative rotation. And I'm going to right click on the new relative rotation input, and I'm going to click split struct pin. And that essentially is going to change it from the rotator values into individual float values. And then next, this is where we created our start position. I'm going to drag in our rotation variable and type in get. And then from there, I'm going to drag out and type in BreakRotator, and it's going to make it in these little float values here. You can left click and drag to highlight multiple nodes and drag them around, by the way, if that was not mentioned before. And I'm just going to simply drag out of the Z and then type in float plus, and then you want to get the float plus float node. And it's just going to look like this. From there, we're going to drag, you now see our green float value that we created from the timeline. It's called rot. That's what I called it for rotator. And I'm just going to drag that into the other part, or the other input of the float plus float. And then lastly, I'm just going to drag the output pin into our new relative Z rotation. And that is it as far as making the door open. So now I'm going to compile that, make sure I have no errors. I'm going to leave that up there for a second for those catching up. I dragged in the rotate, click get to get a reference to our rotator. I dragged out from here, click use the node BreakRotator, and that essentially just breaks it to the X, Y, and Z. Yes, sir? How did I change it from the rotator to those 3 values? Okay, so if you right click on your, if I create another one of these, I don't know what Control F is. Oh, it's going to make sense. All right, so if you right click on the new rotator value and click split struct pin, it will create those 3 input values. No problem. Now I'm just going to click compile. And now if I go back into the world, I'm going to check this real quick. I'm going to go into the third person character and set our key to true, just so we can see that the door works. I'm going to compile it. So now the third person has the key by default. And if I click play, run up to the door, it's really slow. We can change that value by the track, but over a period of 2 seconds, the door will rotate over 90 degrees. And then again, if we go, we notice that it doesn't do it again because we created that HasOpen variable that checks and runs after we open the door the first time. So that is all the code for the door itself. Yes, sir. All right, the node after the BreakRotator was the question. This node right here, if you drag out from the Z and you type in float and then the plus symbol, you should get a float plus float node, and that is essentially just adding the 2 floats together for our offset. All right, here we go. I just had to answer a quick thing. So now, so that is the nodes. Now our door opens. So I'm just going to quickly change our third person character back to not having the key by default after the autosave. And again, if you want to test that as well, go to your third-person blueprint controller or your third-person blueprint where we created the has key. Click on the has key, change the default value to true, and you can compile it and test it. But you don't have to if you don't want to. That's just a good way to test it, setting the key to true, and that way we can test if our code works. So now it is time to create the key itself. So in the key, I'm going to go back to my blueprints folder in the content window and right-click again, and we're going to create another blueprint. And this blueprint is going to be created exactly the same way as before, and it's going to be of type actor. And I'm just going to simply name this key. All right, so now we have our blueprint key. Do we have any questions before we begin our next blueprint? Anything in chat, you can just go ahead and put it in chat and it will get to me really shortly. I'm just going to go ahead and double click and open up our blueprint by clicking on it in the content window, and you'll see another tab is created called our key. I'm going to pull that up on my side real quick. Say something just fell over here. I'm not quite sure what it is. Pause 1 second. I'm just pulling up the key on my reference here. All right, so we are now ready to start our key. So this is a fun thing. Essentially, we want to check if it's the player again, but programmers can be lazy and we don't want to write that code again, do we? Does anyone want to write that code again? No, that's what I'm hearing. All right, so we're going to learn a fun little function that you can do where you can actually copy and paste blueprints between blueprints. So I'm actually going to go back to my door, and in our nodes, all the way over here, you can see this little section right here where it is the player, if it's the player, and then this branch. So I am going to copy our toPrint text and go all the way over, ignoring this little dot here. And if there's anything you selected that you don't want to, you can hold down left control. Is there even a right control? Yes, left control, and then left click on an object to deselect it if you did it by accident. So after you'll see all of the objects or nodes selected in orange. You can actually just press Control C or right click and I believe copy. And we can go back to our node or our objects, I apologize, our objects for our key. And then in our object for our key, you can go to the event graph like we did before. And I'm just gonna check my reference real quick. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and quickly delete these two nodes. Y'all don't have to. I just want to keep it clean because having more events that aren't needed just kind of clogs things up. And again, it's just left click and then click delete. I'm actually going to go ahead and So to paste these blueprints in from your other blueprint, the door blueprint, you can actually just press Control V or right click paste, and you will see all of those nodes from the other blueprint now exist within our key. However, we don't need to string them up yet. So I'm just going to drag them kind of down here where they will be earlier or later. So now it is time to create the actual physical presence of your physical presence of your key. And do so, we're going to create a cube like we did for the door. So I'm going to go to the viewport window right here and click on add component and just type in a cube. And just click enter and you'll see our cube comes up as before. If I remember from memory that this cube is really big by default, so I'm actually just going to go through the scale and change this to 0.5 across the board just to make it a little bit smaller. So on the scale, just X, Y, and Z are 0.5. Do we have any questions so far? Any problems with the blueprints or anything? All right. So now that we have that, we want to add again our collider so we can detect when the player gets close to it. And to do that, I'm just going to type in our click on the big green button that says add component and type in box and get our box collision. And then I'm just going to leave it box for now. You can name it collider. I'm actually going to rename it collider now I think about it. Right click and you can click rename if you accidentally just did what I did right down here. And I'm just going to rename it collider like I did last time for our door. And I'm going to scale it up by clicking on our scale or R button with the collider selected. And I'm just going to scale the box. If I remember how to do this correctly, should be able to click that. There we go. I'm just going to kind of scale the box using these little green axes here, or these little axes here. And that will just be the collider zone for when the player gets close to it. All right, so those are the only things we need to do. Just like with the door, it's just a box and a collider, and these can actually stay right where they are on the origin because they're not doing any fancy swing, or they don't need to be doing any fancy swinging. However, we're gonna add a little spin to it. So now I'm gonna click compile, and I'm gonna go with the collider. I'm gonna go down on the details panel, and we need to add an event again to trigger when the player enters that zone. So again, I'm going to click on the collider, scroll all the way down, and click the second green button on the events, and then navigate to my event graph, where it will spawn this node for us. So we're going to drag that node up to our code that we pasted in before. I'm going to go ahead and get our references. I'm going to left click drag from the other actor to the get display name, and I'm going to drag our white wire, our energy wire, out of the get component begin overlap to our print text. And then we have our this is the player, this is not the player by default, and we can continue. So the last thing we need to do for this key is if this is the key, so we want to use our top print text, we want to cast third person character again. And we want to get our reference from other actor as we did before. And I'm going to go ahead and add my double clicks on the wire to make it a little bit more just, cleaner, looks a little bit better. It's easier to read when you forget about the blueprint for like a day and you come back and you want to change values in your door key. And we just want to cast to the player. And as the player, we want to set has key. And we want to connect our wire here so the order goes proper. And I just missed. Let me try again. There we go. And we're just going to mark true for has key. And then the last node for this is we just want to drag out from our set and type in destroy, and this will destroy the key once it's been touched. And then I'm just going to click compile. After that, I'm going to go back to our, well, I guess before we go, do we have any questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, you go through a little fast. Here's the code again. This is the code from the previous door, checking if it's the player. And then if true, we cast the third person character, go to the set key, we set the key to true, and then we destroy the actor, which is the key, so the key can't be picked up again. Let's give a little overview. Are we all good for that? All right. So now if I go to the third person example map and drag in our key, and then just kind of set it so it's over here. We actually have time to add the rotator. We might do that. There is a way to make the key rotate using the timeline, but we're going a little bit short on time, so I might not do that part today, but it uses the same timeline and the same method to just add the rotation. So now if we click play, if we walk up to our door, we'll notice this is the player, and it says the name, but we don't have the key, so nothing happens. We run up to our key, the key destroys itself, we walk up to the door, and the door now opens. All right, cool. So now that we've done that, we now have our essential functioning component. We have our key and we have our door. The door will not open if you don't have the key. Run up to it, you have the key, and now the door will open over the period of 2 seconds from the timeline. So that is it for the key and lock part. So now we want to maybe create like something that the door goes to, so it's not just a door in open space, because essentially you could just walk around it, and that's no fun. So we want to create maybe a cave of some sort that we want an entrance to, or put the door in a cave and hide the key in the cave as well, so you have to search the cave to go then find this door. All right, so now we are going to create our cave. This is a little bit more of the level design. Those that were here at the last workshop were doing essentially the same thing with additive and subtractive geometry, and I'll go over that quickly really if I was just give an overview. So essentially we're going to create the form or the framework of our cave really quick. And to do that, on the left side in our modes panel, I'm just going to drag it out a little bit. we want to go down to geometry, and we want to drag in a box. And with this box, I'm just going to click R with it selected, or the space bar, as some people have been going through, and I'm just going to scale this box up and then just kind of navigate it right here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's allowed to go out a little bit, but we're essentially just scaling it to create a really big kind of area that we can work with for our cave. I'm just going to try and get it a little bit closer, like that. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to make mine just a little bit taller, because I think I just made it really tall. It's fine. Yeah, we're fine with that. All right, there we go. I'm going to go with that for now. Cool. So now we have our outward framework. It just scaled out a really big cube or a mesh geometry that we can use additive and subtractive properties for. Now what we're going to do is we are going to drag in a sphere or a sphere from our geometry tab as well. So I'm going to drag that in, and I'm just going to kind of place it right there behind the door. And you'll see why we do that in a moment. Do we have any questions? All right, if you have any questions in the chat as well, you can go ahead and put them down. Yes, sir. All right, so geometry are the type of objects that can be affected by the additive and subtractive, and they can be you can edit each individual point. So to do that really quick, I'll just show you with cubes or with geometry, you can click on these individual faces and you can start to change them individually. It's like using Blender within the editor, where your basics can't do that, essentially. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. So I'm going to go ahead and you want your sphere to be selected. And in your details panel, you want to go and find, watch it literally not show up for me. All right, so with your sphere brush selected and none of the faces selective, you want to find the brush settings under the details panel, and the brush type, you want to click it and change it to subtractive. Essentially what this does is instead of adding and drawing mesh to the screen, when it's set to subtractive, whatever volume it takes up, it will start to take away from the meshes. So doing so, we can now essentially start to carve a cave into this cube. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag this into our cave. I'm going to bring it down to our box, drag it down. And I'm actually going to scale it down a little bit just to make the entrance a little smaller. And then I'm going to move into here, inside the box. And when you're inside the box, you won't see any parts that are solid, but you'll only see the outlines for the box itself. So I'm going to use a new function. So you press Alt, hold down Alt and drag, and this will essentially duplicate your object. And I'm just going to scale it up again. You can switch between spacebar or these right here. And we now have a kind of a cave going into this little area right here. And duplicating this, essentially, you can shape your cave however you want. So I'm just going to quickly Alt drag and just kind of, oh wait, I did that wrong. There we go. So I'm just going to kind of quickly make a really kind of basic small cave, but it's just the mechanic of using the subtractive meshes and everything. And then inside here, actually, for today, we'll make the door the entrance to the cave. It's like a secret cave that you find hidden. So I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to click play really quick and make sure a player can go into it, which it can. And I'm going to put our door directly in front of our cave. What's up? Is the door is crooked? That's very, very possible. Yes, it's at 169. So I'm going to set it back to 180. Drag it right here. And for now, we're just going to leave it like this. I'm going to set my key off to the side. And I'm going to rebuild the lighting really quick. This is just more of a note. You don't have to build the lighting now, but I'm going to rebuild it so I can show you the very last step. All right, so now that our lighting has built, I'm going to fly into our cave. And you'll notice you can't see. That's because there is no light inside of our cave. So to quickly add lighting, we can fly into our cave, really dark finder cave, and if you hold down left click in the editor, and then if you hold down, the L key, and then click left click, that actually spawns a point light in the world. It's just a quick way to add point lights in your scene. Sometimes they're good for like you just in a dark space, you need to look at something. You can spawn a light real quick and change your thing, then delete the light, or you can spawn the light and keep the light there. So for now, I'm just going to drag and put this light up near the top of our scene here. And I'll maybe create another one over here. Just for now. And then so now when I click play, let me go grab my key real quick to make sure it looks all right. Our door opens. We can now go in and we can see a quick way to light up our cave. With our lights, you can also, if I go find the lights, click on this one. In the details panel, under light, you can change the brightness of the light, which is intensity. You can also change the light color, which for this one, if I wanted to make maybe like a kind of an orange, or not orange, sorry, yellow. And then just kind of leave this one how it is. And you click play, you'll be able to see the differences between the light. Oh, I'm dumb. Here we go. And now we can see that. The cave's a little small, but it's all right. You can scale those and you can shape the cave however you want. Do we have any questions or any problems or anything? Those for as well in chat. All right, so the last thing we want to do is add a material to this cave, just so it doesn't have the boring grid on it. So to do that real quick, I'm just going to get out of our play mode and click in our blueprints folder because we can just leave it here for now. Right click in the blueprints folder and click the material button. And that's going to create a material. And so I'm just going to name this cave. Actually, I almost just deleted it. I'm just going to name this mat underscore cave. And then I'm going to double click to open it. And this is our material editor. So really quickly, the really only thing for the most basic materials is putting a base color. And there's really a hotkey to do that. Essentially, we need to create a constant vector 3, or also in Unreal, you can just hold down the number 3 key and left click, and it will spawn one in for you. To repeat that again, you can hold down the number 3 key and left click in the material, and it will create it right there. I'm just going to drag our pin from the output of the vector 3 to the base collider or the base color, and double click on our vector 3 to change the color. And I'm just going to set it to just kind of a dark gray, and then click apply. Any questions? All right. We were just clarifying the direction of the axes. Yes, sir. Yes, and then the Z is your third dimension. Awesome. So for the last part, I have our color. I'm going to go back to our example map. We are almost out of time, but we are also almost done. So we can click. Well, where did I just go? Oh, that's where we go. All right, cool. So lastly, I just want to kind of add the gray inside of this little cave here so it looks like a cave and not a creepy grid, I guess. So I'm just going to click anywhere on any of these faces here and find where under geometry where it says select. And if I remember, it is select adjacent surfaces. Yes. So if you click select under geometry and select adjacent surfaces, you can drag your matte material onto those selected, and it will apply the gray material or whatever color material you made it to the surface. And 1 second, it should appear like that. And then lastly, you can do that for the last ones. Click on your cave, select all adjacent surfaces, and again, drag your material out. You can just kind of go down the line. I think you can shift click. Let me try it. You can control click, select. Let me see if this works. Okay, yes, you can shift click or control click, select multiple, and then go to geometry, select adjacent surfaces, and you can apply the material to more object or one or more objects at the same time. Okay, so the question was, how do you point in a point light? To put a point light, you can hold down the L key in the viewport or the editor window. L is literally the letter key L. Yes. Sorry. And so holding down the L key and left clicking, you will get a light. I just also noticed my materials didn't add, so maybe I was incorrect on my statement before. I'm just going to apply them individually real quick. Yes, okay, so maybe I was wrong, or maybe I just forgot how to do it real quick. So yes, so just click on my graph, click on select all adjacent surfaces, and drag our material. And we now have, I'm going to apply it to the outside as well. If we click play, we can now go pick up our key, open the door, and then inside the door, we have what to begin the miniature parts of a cave. Or do we have any questions, any suggestions, any comments, thoughts, anything for chat as well? Are we good? All right. We do have a Discord link that if you have any questions before, you can join that link. I believe it should be on the stream or on my page on the GDDA. You can go there, join our Discord, and you can @ me. I am Ben. But you just @ Ben, and you'll see me in the Discord. You can ask me any questions. We also have a workshop help chat that you can ask any more questions or for any more help. All right, so our next meeting date is 2 weeks from today. I believe it's the 1st of spring break. So we will be meeting April 8th. All right, so our next meeting date is April 8th. We will be doing a, I can actually, should I demo it real quick? All right, so I'll actually pull it up real quick for those doing up. I will bring up the demo here. I'm just gonna minimize that. Workshops. All right, so I'm bringing up the, this is the demo project for our next meeting on April 8th. We are going to be creating a waypoint AI system, essentially. You can think of it as a guard that walks between a numerous amount of points, and when he sees you, he will start to chase you until you get out of his range, and then he will go back to guard his points again, and I will give that little small demo real quick. So you can see him immediately up there. He just starts to run his points, and every 5 seconds he gets a new point. So if he makes it there early, he will hang out there for a moment until his timer goes down, and he'll start to run. And then if he sees you, which I'll run up here real quick, he will double his speed and start to chase you. It's kind of creepy, but he's actually really easy to juke out as well. So if you can just get behind him, he literally he's like, what just happened? And he has no idea. But that's just for right now because we're going to handle the basics of AI. We don't want to do anything crazy. We don't want to add in sound implementation where you can actually check for sound sources that are near the AI. But essentially, if he sees you, he will start chasing you really fast, and it's quite terrifying. But what's fun about it is you can start jumping around, and he just gets really confused. But that's essentially what we're going to be looking at for on April 8th. That's going to be our next demo. That concludes the workshop for today, workshop 2. Thank you guys for joining with us. I hope everything was clear. If you have any questions, again, my name is Ben. You can go to the Discord, the Unreal Discord, and message me, and I will do my best to answer your questions. Again, thanks for guys joining us, and that is all we have for today.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, KSU. We'll see you April 8th.